His family had ranched this land for generations, but when he returned home, 72 brand new houses stood on his property, all built by a ruthless HOA without his knowledge or consent. Now, armed with the original deed, he must fight to take back what's rightfully his, even if it means going to war with an entire community. Luke McKenna took a deep breath as he pulled his truck up the long, winding dirt road leading to his family's ranch. He hadn't been back in over a decade, but the sight of the rolling hills and sprawling pastures instantly flooded him with memories. This was where he'd spent his childhood, riding horses, helping his father with the cattle, and daydreaming about one day inheriting the land. As the truck crested the final hill, Luke's heart sank. Where his family's historic Ado home and sprawling stables once stood, there now lay row after row of identical two-story houses. Rows of manicured lawns, trimmed hedges, and winding sidewalks stretched out as far as the eye could see. "What the hell?" Luke muttered, slamming on the brakes. He fumbled for the old deed hidden in the glove compartment, his hands shaking. There was no way this could be happening. His family had owned this land for over a century. There was no way some development could just swoop an end. Letting out a frustrated growl, Luke flung open the truck door and stormed towards the nearest house. An elderly woman watering her petunias paused and looked up, eyes widening in surprise. "Excuse me, ma'am," Luke called out, marching across her pristine lawn. "I need to speak to whoever's in charge of this development." The woman blinked, taken aback by his aggressive tone. I'm not sure who you'd need to speak to," she stammered. "This is the Meadowbrook Community Association." Luke's jaw tightened. "Well, then I need to speak to whoever's running the Meadowbrook Community Association," he said through gritted teeth. "This is my land, and I want to know how the hell you people built 72 houses on it without my permission." The woman's eyes went wide. "Your land?" she repeated, taking a step back. But this land was sold to the HOA years ago. They developed it into the Meadowbrook community." Luke felt like the ground had been yanked out from under him. "Sold?" he echoed, his voice barely above a whisper. Clutching the deed in his hand, he stormed towards the nearest house, determined to get to the bottom of this. As Luke approached the nearest house, the front door swung open, and a smartly dressed man in his 50s stepped out, a stern expression on his face. "Can I help you, sir?" the man asked, eyeing Luke warily. "You bet your ass you can help me," Luke snapped, brandishing the old deed. "I need to speak to whoever's in charge of this so-called Meadowbrook Community Association immediately. This land belongs to my family, and I want to know how you people built 72 houses on it without our consent." The man's eyes narrowed. "I'm the president of the Meadowbrook HOA," he said coolly, "and I can assure you this land was legally acquired and developed fair and square. If you have any issues, I suggest you take it up with our legal counsel." Luke's grip tightened on the deed, his knuckles turning white. "I'm telling you, this is my land," he growled. "My family has owned it for over a century. There's no way you people could have just swooped in and—" "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the premises," the HOA president interrupted, his tone brooking no argument. "If you continue to trespass and harass the residents, I'll have no choice but to call the authorities." Luke's jaw clenched as the man turned and started to head back inside. "This isn't over," he called after him. "You hear me? I'm going to get to the bottom of this, and I'm going to take back what's rightfully mine." The HOA president paused, glancing back over his shoulder. "Good luck with that," he said, a hint of a smirk on his face. Then he disappeared back into the house, slamming the door behind him. Luke stood there, seething with rage. He couldn't believe this was happening. How could some uppity HOA just waltz in and steal his family's land, right out from under their noses? There had to be some kind of mistake, some kind of loophole or technicality they were exploiting. Gritting his teeth, Luke turned and stormed back to his truck, his mind racing. He needed to find out exactly what had happened, and he needed to do it fast. This was his land, his birthright. And he'd be damned if he was going to let some smarmy HOA president take it from him without a fight. Luke slammed the truck door and sat there, hands gripping the steering wheel, heart pounding in his chest. How could this be happening? After all these years, how could his family's land just disappear like that? Forcing himself to take a deep breath, he reached into the glove compartment and pulled out the faded, time-worn deed. His fingers traced the familiar handwriting, the elegant signatures, the official stamp. This was the proof, the irrefutable evidence that this land belonged to the McKenna family. But the HOA president had spoken with such confidence, such certainty. Clearly, they believed they had a legitimate claim to the property. Luke knew he needed to find out exactly what had happened, and fast, before the HOA tried to push him off what was rightfully his. Glancing up, he spotted a small real estate office at the edge of the Meadowbrook development. Gripping the deed tightly, he got out of the truck and headed straight for the door. A cheerful-looking woman greeted him as he stepped inside. "Welcome to Meadowbrook Realty. How can I help you today?" "I need to know the history of this land," Luke said, cutting right to the chase. "How did the Meadowbrook Community Association acquire it?" The woman's brow furrowed slightly. "I'm afraid I don't have access to all the historical records," she said apologetically. "But from what I understand, the land was purchased by the HOA from a private owner several years ago. The development was then built according to all local zoning laws and regulations." Luke felt a surge of frustration. "Do you have any contact information for this private owner?" he pressed. "I need to speak with them immediately." The realtor hesitated. "I'm sorry, but I'm not able to share that kind of private information," she said. "If you have concerns, I'd suggest speaking with the HOA president or their legal team." Luke's jaw tightened. "Look, this is my family's land," he insisted. "I have the original deed right here. There's no way it could have been sold without my knowledge or consent." The realtor's eyes widened slightly, and she took a step back. I'm sorry, sir, but I really can't discuss this any further," she stammered. "If you have a dispute with the HOA, you'll need to take it up with them directly." Frustrated, Luke let out a heavy sigh and turned to leave. As he reached for the door, a thought struck him. "Wait," he said, turning back to the realtor. "Do you have any contact information for the previous owner? Even if you can't share it, maybe you could at least put me in touch with the HOA's legal team." The realtor hesitated, then slowly nodded. I suppose I could provide you with the number for the HOA's attorney," she said reluctantly. Reaching for a business card, she scribbled a number on the back and handed it to him. "But I can't guarantee they'll be willing to discuss this with you." Luke nodded, pocketing the card. "That's all I ask," he said. Clutching the deed tightly, he turned and strode out of the office, his mind racing. He had a number to call, a lead to follow. And he was damn well going to get to the bottom of this, no matter what it took. Luke paced restlessly in his motel room, the HOA attorney's business card clutched tightly in his hand. He'd spent the better part of the afternoon making phone call after phone call, but every time he tried to get through to the HOA's legal team, he was met with the same response. "I'm sorry, but we can't discuss any ongoing legal matters with you." Frustration bubbled within him. How could they just brush him off like this? This was his family's land, his birthright. He had the original deed to prove it. Didn't that count for anything? Scowling, he flopped down on the edge of the bed, running a hand through his hair. He needed to find a way to break through the HOA's wall of bureaucracy, to get someone in their legal department to actually listen to him. But with every door slammed in his face, he was starting to feel like he was fighting a losing battle. A sudden knock at the door jolted him out of his thoughts. Cautiously, he peered through the peephole, then yanked the door open in surprise. "Lucy," he exclaimed, staring at the woman standing on his doorstep. "What the hell are you doing here?" His sister offered him a wry smile. Nice to see you too, Luke, she said dryly. Mind if I come in? Luke hesitated, then stepped aside, allowing her to sweep past him into the room. How did you even know I was here? He asked, closing the door behind her. I have my ways, Lucy said with a shrug, settling herself onto the edge of the bed. Her gaze settled on the deed in his hand, and her brow furrowed. So, I hear you're trying to take on the Meadowbrook HOA. Sounds like you've been busy. Luke sighed, tossing the deed onto the bedside table. That's an understatement, he muttered. This whole thing is a goddamn nightmare. I show up, ready to claim what's rightfully ours, and they act like I'm the one who's out of line. Lucy nodded slowly. I saw the news about the development, she said. It's been all over the local media. Apparently, the HOA is claiming they bought the land fair and square from the previous owner. Luke's jaw tightened. That's the thing. There was no previous owner, he said, his voice laced with frustration. This land has been in our family for over a century. There's no way it could have been sold without my knowledge. His sister studied him for a moment, her expression contemplative. Well, then it sounds like we need to figure out who's been pulling the strings here, she said. Because something tells me this isn't just a simple case of an HOA overstepping its bounds. Luke felt a flicker of hope. You think you can help? He asked, meeting her gaze. Lucy offered him a determined smile. Hey, you're not the only McKenna who's ready to fight for this land, she said. If anyone's going to get to the bottom of this, it's going to be us. With Lucy's help, Luke began digging deeper into the history of the Meadowbrook development. They spent hours combing through old property records, land deeds, and news clippings, piecing together a picture of how this whole thing had gone down. What they uncovered was a tangled web of shady real estate deals, backroom negotiations, and political maneuvering. It seemed the previous owner of the McKenna family's land had been a well-connected local businessman with ties to the city council. Somehow, he had managed to orchestrate the sale of the property to the Meadowbrook HOA, all while keeping the McKennas in the dark. This is unbelievable, Luke muttered, rubbing his temples in frustration. How the hell did they pull this off? Lucy shook her head, her brow furrowed in concentration. It looks like the previous owner had the right connections, and a lot of influence with the local government, she said. He probably promised the city some kickbacks or development deals in exchange for greasing the wheels on this sale. Luke let out a frustrated sigh. So what? They just bullied their way into taking our land? He growled. And the HOA is just going along with it. Seems that way, Lucy said grimly. The previous owner probably made them a sweetheart of a deal, and the HOA jumped at the chance to develop the land. And with the city in their pocket, they were able to push this through without any real opposition. Luke felt his blood boiling. Well, they're about to meet some real opposition, he said, his jaw set with determination. There's no way I'm letting them get away with this. This land is ours, and I'm going to prove it, even if I have to take these bastards to court. Lucy nodded, a steely glint in her eye. That's what I was hoping you'd say, she said. Because I'm with you, Luke. We're going to fight this, no matter what it takes. Reaching across the table, she squeezed his hand reassuringly. We're McKennas, remember, she said, a hint of a smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. We don't back down from a fight. Luke felt a surge of gratitude and resolve. With his sister by his side, he knew he had a fighting chance. These developers and their slimy cronies had no idea what they were up against. The McKennas were coming, and they were coming for what was rightfully theirs. With a renewed sense of purpose, Luke and Lucy set to work, determined to uncover the truth and reclaim the family's land. They pored over every document, interviewed local officials and residents, and pieced together the complex web of corruption and deceit that had allowed the Meadowbrook HOA to take over their property. As they dug deeper, the scale of the conspiracy began to emerge. The previous owner had bribed city councilors, manipulated zoning laws, and even threatened local homeowners to ensure the development project went through unimpeded. Meanwhile, the HOA leadership had turned a blind eye to these shady tactics, driven by their own greed and ambition. "This is unbelievable," Lucy said, shaking her head in disgust as they reviewed the damning evidence. "They practically stole our land right out from under us." Luke's hands clenched into fists, his knuckles turning white. "Well, they're not going to get away with it," he growled. "I'm going to make sure every last one of them pays for what they've done." Fueled by righteous anger, the siblings began assembling their case, gathering witness statements, financial records, and other incriminating documents. They knew they were up against a formidable opponent. The Meadowbrook HOA had deep pockets and a team of high-powered lawyers at their disposal. But the McKennas were determined to fight tooth and nail to reclaim what was rightfully theirs. As they prepared to take their case to court, Luke and Lucy made a startling discovery. The HOA president, the very man who had confronted Luke on the property, was in cahoots with the previous owner. The two had orchestrated the entire scheme, lining their own pockets while callously disregarding the McKennas' ancestral rights. "This is it," Luke said, his eyes blazing with fury. "We've got them dead to rights. Now we just need to bring them down." With renewed vigor, the siblings launched their legal offensive, filing a series of lawsuits and petitions that threatened to unravel the entire Meadowbrook development. The HOA leadership, realizing the noose was tightening, desperately tried to bury the evidence and stall the proceedings, but Luke and Lucy were relentless in their pursuit of justice. As the case dragged on, the pressure mounted and cracks began to show in the HOA's carefully constructed facade. Witnesses came forward, whistleblowers emerged, and the truth slowly but surely began to unravel the Meadowbrook conspiracy. Luke and Lucy knew they were close. Victory was within their grasp, and they were determined to see this fight through to the end, no matter the cost. The courtroom was packed, the air thick with tension as the judge took his seat. Luke and Lucy McKenna sat in the front row, their eyes locked on the proceedings, their hearts pounding with anticipation. After months of exhaustive legal battles, the moment of truth had finally arrived. The McKennas had painstakingly built their case, uncovering the web of corruption and deceit that had allowed the Meadowbrook HOA to seize their family's land. Now, it all came down to this. As the judge cleared his throat and began to speak, Luke felt a surge of adrenaline. This was it, their one chance to reclaim what was rightfully theirs. "The court has carefully reviewed the evidence presented by both parties," the judge said, his gaze sweeping across the room. "And based on the overwhelming documentation provided by the McKenna family, it is the ruling of this court that the Meadowbrook Community Association has engaged in a flagrant abuse of power and illegal acquisition of the McKenna family's ancestral land." A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom, and Luke felt a surge of triumph. They'd done it. They'd blown the lid off the HOA's scheme and exposed the truth. "The court hereby orders the immediate cessation of all development activities on the McKenna property," the judge continued, his voice firm and unwavering. "Furthermore, the Meadowbrook HOA is required to relinquish all rights and titles to the land, which is to be returned to the McKenna family forthwith." The HOA president and his team of lawyers sat in stunned silence, their faces etched with disbelief. Luke and Lucy, on the other hand, were beaming with pride and relief. "This is a clear and unequivocal victory for the McKenna family," the judge declared, his gavel coming down with a resounding thud. "Justice has been served." As the courtroom erupted into a din of excited chatter, Luke turned to his sister, a wide grin spreading across his face. "We did it, Luce," he said, pulling her into a tight embrace. "We got our land back." Lucy squeezed him back, her eyes shining with tears of joy. "I never doubted you for a second, big brother," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "This is where we belong, on our family's land, where we've always been." Luke nodded, his heart swelling with pride and gratitude. After all the challenges and setbacks, they had finally reclaimed what was rightfully theirs, and he knew, in that moment, that the McKenna legacy would live on for generations to come. In the aftermath of the trial, the Meadowbrook HOA was thrown into chaos. With the court's ruling, the community's entire development project had been thrown into jeopardy. Residents were left scrambling, unsure of the fate of their newly built homes. Meanwhile, Luke and Lucy McKenna wasted no time in reasserting their claim over the family's ancestral land. They moved swiftly to secure the property, enlisting the help of local authorities to ensure the HOA complied with the court's order. As the news of the McKenna's triumph spread, the community was split. Some residents, outraged at the loss of their homes, lashed out angrily, accusing the siblings of callousness and greed. Others, however, saw the situation in a different light, recognizing the injustice that had been perpetrated against the McKenna family. "This land has been ours for generations," Luke declared, addressing a gathering of reporters and community members. "We never wanted to see anyone lose their homes, but the fact is, this property was taken from us through underhanded means. We're simply reclaiming what's rightfully ours." Lucy stood by his side, her expression grave but resolute. "Our family has always been good stewards of this land," she said. "We have no intention of displacing the residents or disrupting the community. Our goal is to find a fair and equitable solution that respects everyone's interests." The HOA leadership, reeling from their humiliating defeat, scrambled to salvage the situation. Desperate to avoid a protracted legal battle, they reached out to the McKennas, offering to negotiate a settlement. After weeks of tense discussions, a compromise was reached. The HOA would be responsible for relocating the residents to a new development, with the McKennas providing financial assistance to ease the transition. In exchange, the family would assume ownership of the land, with the understanding that they would work with the community to ensure a smooth and respectful integration. As the dust settled, Luke and Lucy stood side by side, surveying the familiar landscape. It had been a long and arduous fight, but in the end, they had emerged victorious, not just for themselves, but for their entire family legacy. "It's good to be home," Luke said, a sense of peace and belonging washing over him. Lucy nodded, a smile playing on her lips. "Yeah," she agreed, squeezing his hand. "It sure is." Together, they turned and headed towards the horizon, ready to write the next chapter in the McKenna family's story.